Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor here, back again with another review for you guys. And today we're going to be covering another PS2 classic released by Capcom back in 2002, the renowned hack-and-slash series Onimusha 2: Samurai's Destiny. Similar to famous franchises like God of War and Devil May Cry, Onimusha 2 was developed by Capcom and released as a very unique hack-and-slash title with different elements in comparison to games like God of War and Devil May Cry, adding in a very different aesthetic, control style, different kind of upgrade system, story interaction, and of course setting, in this case feudal Japan. As far as my thoughts on the game go, I will admit I was kind of skeptical about this game going in. Capcom released a bunch of really good hack-and-slash games in the form of Devil May Cry, with the exception of Devil May Cry 2. It is one of my favorite series of all time now, just based off of the game, so I had good expectations going in as to what I hoped Onimusha 2 would produce. And I have to say, by the end of it, I was fairly impressed with it, especially from a franchise that I had never personally heard of. And the good part about this game was, even though it's the second game in the series, you really don't have to play the first game to understand what's going on in this game. So to start this review, let's discuss the visual and musical fidelity in this game. Visually, Onimusha 2 looks really good, actually, for the PS2. Now, this game uses pre-rendered backgrounds and different set pieces that you go through, whether it be a destroyed village, whether it be going through gold mines, or whether it be really any other location throughout the game, even with some really cool-looking CGI cutscenes. The pre-rendered backgrounds look really good. The different detailing and modeling looks really good for a lot of the different enemy variants that you encounter, in this case, demons. One thing that really impressed me for the PS2 was also the CG cutscenes that they ended up having for this game, which is some of the most impressive that I've seen from this era, considering this was back in the early 2000s, back when this kind of thing was still relatively new in the PlayStation's life cycle. The visual fidelity in this game looks really good, and I really do love the animations for the different attacks, the different enemy movements, the different ways that Jubei, your main character, ends up moving around the arenas. The visual fidelities and whatnot, like in the underground arena at one point that you go into, the different visual fidelities like the lava effects and whatnot in the gold mines, and just overall, this game does look pretty good on the PS2. It's not the most visually appealing game I've seen on the PlayStation, but it looks good nonetheless and does its job. The music in this game, like past reviews that I've discussed, there are, so far on the show, very few games that I've played that kind of grabbed my attention with the music. That's not to say the music in this game is bad, because it's not. It fits the theme of medieval Japan. It has like the classic kind of tunes that you'd be expecting. Has like the woodwind instruments. Has some different piano notes and whatnot in there, if that makes any sense. Kind of like percussion style music. Picture anything from medieval Japan, and that's basically what this game's music is. And it really works. And it does serve as really good atmospheric music as you're traveling through these areas, killing demons, and progressing what story there is. And quite frankly, I enjoy those parts of the game. I think that the music's alright, and the visual fidelity is pretty good, especially with the CG cutscenes. So, overall, as far as how it looks and how it sounds, pretty good. Now, before we tackle the story or any other kind of side bits that I want to discuss for the game, I will say the combat in Onimusha and the control is kind of a divisive thing for me when it comes to a hack-and-slash game. As I mentioned before, this game takes a very different approach with the style and the gameplay controls comparison to God of War, Devil May Cry, which are very fluid to execute, especially in Devil May Cry. Fast, fluid, rapid-paced action, hacking and slashing enemies, shooting them up, all that stuff that you're used to in a very fast-paced game. Onimusha 2 is not like that. Onimusha 2 is very slow, strategic. It makes use of different fixed camera angles. It makes use of tank controls. And quite frankly, I was kind of skeptical how this was going to work in a hack-and-slash game. Now, what I will say for the core combat itself, for the different weapons that you gain, for the different upgrades you have, since, you know, your main character has demon blood, you have access to a devil trigger of sorts, like, not as good as Dante's, but it still does work whenever you level it up from killing enemies and gaining different orbs and whatnot that they drop, which I thought was fine enough and looked cool enough. But I will say, though, for the combat itself, it has a lock-on system, despite the tank controls and you having to move very stiffly in different areas, and you move at a very consistent rate as what the game allows you to. But the combat itself isn't really hindered this much to it. It locks on your enemies, it hack and slashes them really well. You can guard, you can do super attacks depending on what you have. So that would be really cool if future games would implement that a little bit better in the series. I haven't personally played it, but the combat itself works fine enough. But my main issue with it is the exploration itself, not really so much the combat side of things. Whereas the exploration of the game, you can get stuck on corners really easily, you can lose your way. It's really hard to pinpoint different areas that you can enter because of these tank controls and the camera angles. Difficult to see enemies off screen that you ended up getting hit by, even though you swear it wasn't your fault. And quite frankly, while, again, this game is built around it with the different environments that you go through, and Capcom did a fairly good job of having it to where it's not very cumbersome all in all, it will take some adjusting, and quite frankly, I think that all in all, the control is okay. It works for what it is because the game is built around it. But for me personally, and I think for a lot of other people that have played games like God of War and Devil May Cry, it's not going to be your preferred control style, despite how fluid the actual hacking and slashing of enemies is due to the lock-on feature. for the story side of things, the reason that I haven't really discussed this early in the video like it would have with other games, there's not really much story to this game. The story literally serves as a backdrop for the exploration, for the gameplay, for the puzzles, for everything else that you're doing in this game. Traveling through feudal Japan, your main character's name is Jubei. He is part of a line of demon hunters who he has his blood, or has demon blood in him that allow him access to different abilities and whatnot, and his village is destroyed by an overlord known as Nobunaga, who in the previous game was killed, but he ended up being resurrected by demons, and now he has an entire different army and whatnot. So, you end up going to kill Nobunaga, and I guess Jubei is seeking revenge against him for destroying his village. Now, that's basically the entire plot. There's other characters. There's like 4 different characters that you meet along the way. Each of them have their own little character arc that we'll get into here in a second for a side thing that I want to discuss about this game that makes it more unique than other hack-and-slash games. But the story itself isn't really eventful. There's not really many dialogue exchanges that are very witty or funny. There's not really many experiences that you're going to be able to take away from it. It's mostly just someone on a straight, clear-cut revenge mission. Aside from the different differentiations in the levels and whatnot for the game itself, I guess, if you want to call it that. The story is just there. It's nothing amazing. There's no personality with any of the characters, especially Jubei. There's not really much to him. He's your stereotypical protagonist going to take down the bad guy in a revenge mission. Is basically what this game is. The one guy, though, that is going to be a standout for this game, and he's not amazing in this game either, but I'm going to allow him to introduce himself here, but aside from the lackluster story and characters, this guy stands out. And trust me, you're going to remember his name.
So, let's get started. My name is Gogandantis, the greatest swordsman of all demons.
The last really main thing I wanted to cover about Onimusha 2 that makes this game significant, besides visuals, music, story, combat, control, any of that usual stuff that you want to discuss in these kind of reviews or game, period. One thing that this game does differently from even Devil May Cry or God of War is that this game has a trading system. Now, you meet 4 different main characters throughout the story that end up assisting you at different points. Sometimes they can enter in battle, and they assist you in fighting demons. Sometimes you play as them at different segments of the game, story-wise. This is all dependent on a trade system. There are different points. There's a tavern and a gold mining town that you can mainly do this in early in the game, which I recommend doing, because later on in the game you're not going to have access to this town, and you can only do it when you encounter them in the different areas where you go and fight demons, which you're not always going to see the people that you may want to see. So do it early on. But you gain these different items, like a globe or a telescope or something like that. Now, these items you can't use in combat. You can't use them to upgrade your health or your mana or anything like that, for that matter. But you can trade with the other characters that you meet to not only gain different items that you can use to trade for better things and eventually get stuff that increases your max mana, or it can increase your max health, that kind of thing, which is the main reason why some people may want to do this. But it's also for a narrative reason. Depending on who you trade with the most, depending on who you build the best relationship with and whatnot, you end up learning more about these characters, you interact with them more in the story, and eventually you learn more about them, and you get to play as each of them in a different section of the game. Now, for me, the character I went with first was Magoichi. Now, you can't get everyone in one single playthrough. This is what encourages replayability in this game, too. You get to experience everyone's story within, like, 4 different playthroughs, depending if you want to go back and replay the game. They have different gameplay styles. There's different scenarios that you find yourself in, which, again, increases the replayability, because you're not going to be able to experience everyone's story at once. You're not going to be able to play as each of these different 4 NPCs throughout an entire playthrough. There's one girl that you play as, though, by default, but you can't play as the other 3 in one single playthrough. But each of them have their own unique story, you find out their backstories, and each of them have their own conclusion to the game. You don't get to say goodbye to everybody at the end, but you do get to say bye to the one person that you form the best bond with. Keep in mind, though, and one thing that I will critique this system for, despite how cool I think it is with trading to gain more items, and how cool it is from a narrative standpoint, which is something I will give the story, the one thing I didn't like was how unclear it is. Now, unless you played this game before, or you have an idea of the characters' personalities, if you trade them an item that they're not interested in, and they will express that within their dialogue, and it will tell you if they liked it or didn't like it, then you decrease the relationship, which means not only will you not be able to really experience their stories that well, or get to play as them, but it also decreases your chances of them assisting you in battle, and quite frankly, just decreases the entire relationship. So be very careful whenever you're doing this. I am not ashamed to admit that I used a guide for this, because I had absolutely no idea. I'm new to the game, and honestly, I didn't want to go back and replay it multiple times in order to experiment with this kind of thing, because once you trade items in a single playthrough, you're not going to be able to get them back. They're single items for a reason. So my recommendation is either learn the personalities very well, play the game multiple times, or look up a guide of sorts for the trade system, which there are very useful guides out there that show you what gives you the best rewards, what gives you the best kind of relationship with them, and what will lead you to the higher end items that you're going to want in order to upgrade your HP and various other stats. Overall, Onimusha 2 was a very solid game. Capcom did a really good job with this IP that I had never even really heard of. I've heard mention of it many times in the past, but I'd never played up until this point. Overall, from what I've talked about in this video, with everything in consideration, Onimusha 2 is a good game. It's not one of my favorite games ever made by far. It's not a bad game by any means. It's not an amazing game either. It's there. It is a good experience, a very different experience for a hack-and-slash game, which offers some really cool mechanics with the trades, with experiencing different character stories, with really actually kind of fluid combat with the lock-on system, and just overall some really cool diverse motifs with being in feudal Japan. But, I mean, all in all, with a lackluster story, without a sense of direction with the trading, and quite frankly, no one having a personality whatsoever except for the person I mentioned earlier in this video, I will say Onimusha 2 is worth your time. I would pick it up if you're interested in checking out a different hack-and-slash experience. Just keep in mind the controls and the tank controls and whatnot. If you played the original Resident Evil games, you're in for something interesting. So, but all in all things considered, Onimusha 2 is a good game. I recommend you guys go and check it out. It's very cheap to obtain on the PS2, so I don't think you're going to have any problems getting a hold of it. I recommend at least trying it out. And that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys did enjoy Onimusha 2's review today. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below, as always. And, of course, if you guys did enjoy the video, give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you guys want to catch more reviews in the future. And look out, because for the next video that I do, whenever that may be, it'll be officially concluding our Kingdom Hearts Marathon, which is way past due at this point. And I got caught up with a few things, and I apologize for that. But nonetheless, the next two reviews I'm planning on, concluding the Kingdom Hearts Marathon with Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts Recoded. So, with all that in mind, guys, this has been Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor saying, keep on gaming.